Do you agree that you undermine GPL version 3, and how can we get you to stop?
What?
How can we get you to stop?
Oh, I hate GPL version 3. I undermined it on purpose. I actually thought the GPL version 3 extensions were horrible. I understand why people would want to do them, but I think it should have been a completely new license. My argument for liking version 2, and I still think version 2 is a great license, was that I give you source code, you give me your changes back, we're even, right? That's my take on GPL version 2, right? It's that simple. And version 3 extended that in ways that I personally am really uncomfortable with. Namely, I give you source code. That means that if you use that source code, you can't use it on your device unless you follow my rules. And to me, that's a violation of everything version 2 stood for. And I understand why the FSF did it, because I know what the FSF wants. But to me, it's not the same license at all. So I was very upset and made it very clear, and this was months before version 3 was actually published. There was discussion about this long before. There was an earlier version of version 3 years before, actually, where I said, no, this is not going to fly. And during that earlier discussion, I had already added to the kernel that, hey, I don't have the version 2 or later. And there was no, and I was really happy then when version 3 came out that I had done that something like 5 years before, because there was never any question about what the license for the kernel was. But I actually thought that version 3 is, now, I actually think version 3 is a fine license, right? I'm a firm believer in if you write your code, it is your choice to pick a license. And version 3 is a fine license. Version 3 was not a good, here, we give you version 2, and then we try to sneak in these new rules and try to force everybody to upgrade. That was the part I disliked. And the FSF did some really sneaky stuff. Downright immoral, in my opinion.
So you're talking about TiVoization?
Yeah, the TiVoization was always my main dislike of version 3. And the FSF was being very dishonest, saying, hey, we actually allow you to invalidate the TiVoization clause. And they literally lied to people and said, hey, so that means that you can use GPL version 3 without the TiVoization part, right? This is, how many people heard this particular statement from the FSF? Okay? Maybe they only tried to convince me with that one, but they did, right? And it was like, I'm not stupid, right? Yes, you can, the GPL version 3 allows you to say, okay, TiVoization is not an issue for us, but it allows somebody else to take the project and say, hey, the GPL version 3 without TiVoization is compatible with the full GPL version 3, so I will now make my own fork of this, and I will start doing drivers that use the full version of version 3. And where am I stuck then? I'm stuck saying, hey, I gave you the source code, and now I can't take it back, your changes. That's completely against the whole point of the license in the first place. So the FSF was, I mean, the kind of stuff that was going on behind the scenes made me once and for all to decide to never have anything to do with the FSF again. So if you want to give money to an organization that does good, give it to the EFF. The FSF is full of crazy, bigoted people. That's just my opinion, right? Actually, I overstated that a bit, right? The FSF has a lot of nice people in it, but some of them are a bit too extreme.
Well, I wish the EFF cared more about software freedom, but so do you think that TiVoization benefits me as a user somehow?
No. No, I don't. I mean, but that was never my argument. That was not why I selected GPL version 2. This is my whole point. It's not that I think TiVoization is necessarily something that you should strive for, but it is something that in my worldview, it's your decision. If you make hardware that locks down the software, that's your decision as a hardware maker. That has no impact on my decision as a software maker to give you the software. Do you see where I'm coming from? I don't like locked down hardware, but at the same time, that was never the social contract I intended with Linux. To me, I mean, people may or may not realize GPL version 2 wasn't even the first license for Linux. To me, the important part was always, I give you software, you can do whatever you want with it. If you make improvements, you have to give them back. That was the first version of the license. It also had a completely broken clause, which was completely insane, and I was stupid. Hey, it happens. My original license says you can't make money change hands. And that was a mistake, right? That was clearly just wrong and bad, because it really didn't have anything to do with what I wanted. But I was young, I was poor, I didn't realize that the whole money thing wasn't the important part. And I saw the error of my ways, and I saw the GPL version 2 and said, hey, that's the perfect license. And then I saw the GPL version 3, and I said, no, that's overreaching a lot. That's not what I wanted. And so I made Linux GPL version 2 only, right?
So you think getting the patches back is useful even if you can't modify the device that it's used on?
Yeah. Absolutely. And, I mean, TiVo itself was actually an example of this. Their patches were kind of crafty, but, I mean, they were basically running on originally a fairly standard MIPS thing, and their patches were working around bugs in the chipsets they used. And they were valid patches. The fact that they then felt that their hardware had to be locked down some way, I didn't like it, but as I mentioned, I felt that that was their decision. And they had real reasons for that. That's something people sometimes miss. There are sometimes reasons to do what TiVo did. Sometimes it's imposed on you by wireless carriers. Sometimes it's imposed on you by Disney. Sometimes it's imposed on you by laws. The GPL version 3 actually accepts the last one when it comes to things like medical equipment, I think. But the point is that the whole TiVoization thing, sometimes there's a reason for it. And if you make, I mean, I'm not a hardware designer. I think FPGAs and stuff like that is really cool. But I mean, I really don't want to impose my worldview on anybody else. You don't have to use Linux. If you do use Linux, the only thing I ask for is source code back, right? And then there's all the other verbiage in the GPL version 2 about exact details, and those aren't important. And that was always my standpoint.
Okay, well, I'll stop monopolizing the mic now.
I mean, I like other licenses too. I have used, like, the four, which BSD license is it that's the acceptable one? One of the BSD licenses is actually really nice. And it's actually what? ISC. And I actually encourage people who don't care about the giving code back, but care about hey, I did something cool, please use it. I encourage people to use the BSD license for that. And I mean, the BSD license is wonderful for that. It so happens that I thought that for my project, the giving back was equally important. So for me, BSD is bad. But the point is, for me, right? The GPL version 3 may be the perfect license for what you guys want to do. And that's fine. And then it's the license you should use. It's just that when somebody else wrote the code, you don't get that choice, right?